Yeah, it's trying to go live. I'll come back and see if it's live or not. Otherwise, we are ready. And so this is Kimberly Warren. I'm the CEO with MidCity Excellence. Tonight is May 28th, and it is Thursday. And so we are still in our COVID-19 kind of sort of sheltering in place. Some of us are coming out of the closet slowly, but I want to introduce you to our wonderful show tonight. This is a Solutions Summit with MidCity Excellence Learning Center located at 604 South 20th Street in the lovely St. Joseph, Missouri, Buchanan County. And we are going to talk about in our Solution Summit this evening, racism, police brutality, and racial inequality. There's a lot of inequalities in this world. We're going to talk about racial inequality. So thank you all for joining us as we are live streaming, kind of, sort of, also on Facebook and YouTube. So MidCity Excellence has been here for 19 years, but many of the people that you're going to see around the table, around the Zoom network, have encouraged me not to give up. I'm not here because of myself. I'm only here because, as Ben Franklin says, we've been standing on the shoulders of giants. So I want to introduce you to some people that help me get out of bed every day. We have some community leaders, some representatives, concerned citizens of various backgrounds, professions, and ethnicities, and we'll address recent events involving discrimination, profiling, brutality, and how to eradicate a history of social and racial injustices surrounding people of color. Maya Angelou says, we may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. And so everybody's here saying we'll refuse to give up. So first I want to introduce you to Paul Granberry, who is taking a sip of cold water. Wave your hand. He is our newest graduate from Missouri Western State University. And Paul is the owner, CEO of Wealth Drip Investment Group. And so he has a political science bachelor's now, but he is from St. Louis. He is no stranger to adversity and has learned how to persevere and represented the students at MWSU, my alma mater, as the student governor, appointed by the governor of Missouri to represent students on critical issues involving their education and academia. Say hey, Paul.
How is everybody doing? And first and foremost, Kim, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure, to be invited to the summit, to speak on issues that are important in each and every single one of our communities.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here. We next have Lamina. I'm going to ask her to step out after I introduce her because she is our data solutions. She is the owner and operator and CEO of LD Data Solutions that does everything, technology, data, websites, and much more. She has been a great support running our community computer center at MidCity Excellence. She's from New York, but I think she's losing her accent. And so she, as a mother of Black men and a daughter, she is going to talk about how she keeps her family focused and off the streets and pursuing their God-given purpose. Say hi, Miss Lamina Davis.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being here. She also is, during the day, a professional coder and transcriber and some other stuff with health information systems. Can you go check our live screen on on the Excellence page just to see if we are indeed live streaming there. And yeah. Next we have on our show today Reverend Dr. Bill Hedge, who is no stranger to perseverance and adversity. He has been a long-time educator and now retired administrator from the St. Joe School District. He was the assistant principal of the largest high school, Central High School, here in the city. He also was my teacher and principal. God bless him. And he is the current pastor, longtime pastor of St. Francis Mary Baptist. Let's give it up, Reverend Hedge, our former candidate for U.S. State 16th Congressional District. Hello, Reverend Hedge.
Good evening to all, and as you well know, and as we look around our society, our community, and even our homes, we have still much work to get done. And so we appreciate being involved in this summit. Hopefully we can give some solutions to the issues that we are challenged with on this day. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. One second. Okay, we have David Foster that is joining us, so I'm going to let him in real quick. And as I am doing that, I do want to introduce our current Chief of Police with the SJPD Chief, Chris Canale. And we are so glad he is here today. He has a cultural sensitivity, none like we have seen before in the office that he holds. He is going to talk about the force and the that he leads. And he's also going to talk about the measures that they are taking for prevention, for intervention, the training, how they engage citizens, and so much more. Please send us your questions. I know we're going to tap his brain tonight and see what the state of affairs are in St. Joseph, Missouri. Chief Canale, thank you for being here. I know you're a busy man.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much. And next we are going to ask, let's see, we have Ken Eberhardt that is here. And I met Ken just a few years ago when I was working on my undergraduate degree at Missouri Western. And he has been a long time music educator and mentor for Troy School District, Wasena School District, St. Joseph School District. He has worked in rural and suburban inner city schools. So he is well versed on how to motivate youth of all different races and backgrounds. And he is a music teacher by trade, a drum master. And so he is very disturbed, unsettled about the state of affairs in America and in our community. Ken, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, everybody. I read many memes today, lots of things going around, and Dr. King said, you know, it's the silence of our friends that we'll remember. And so, Kimberly and Robert, I've been your friend for so long and just love you both. And,
thank you for being here. We appreciate your support.
We have to share and we have to talk.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your support. And then we also have on here Miss Lavelle Rucker, and her name is known around the community. Her reputation precedes her. She has been a longtime mentor of mine and my family, and my mom remarked upon her when she was a supervisor in the lunchroom. Now she has ran that lunchroom, moved on up to the big office, and she has counseled and offered guidance to the students. She's a Southside pride, but we stole her away from Benton, and she's at Central now, and is one of a well sought after speaker and mentor to many people of all different backgrounds. She is a social worker and has a master's degree, I believe, in that field, and she is helping keep kids in school and dropping out. So she has mothered a few kids in her home and pushed them onto college and the NFL and kept them off the streets, and still mentoring professionals in the field of education and so much more. Miss Lavelle Rucker, if I got anything wrong in there, let me know, but thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you very much for inviting me to be able to speak forth on this topic, a very troubling topic. As you mentioned, I do live and did start out in the South End, go 238ers, but currently am working in Central High School. And people have asked me before, why, did I leave, the South End and go to what I guess, the natives of St. Joseph will call East End. And I've told them that children are all the same. It does not matter whether I'm in one part of the town, live there, and go to another. All the kids are the same. They need to be loved. And I think that that's a topic that we're going to hit up on tonight, is that all people are created equal. And we need to see just how equal that we are treated like so.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Next, we have Miss LaSherie Ties, and she is the mother of 2 African-American young teenagers that are taking over the house. And so she is also a professional. She is from the Kansas City, Missouri area, but she is a St. Joe School District Parents as Teachers breastfeeding advocate. And she's worked in many capacities in health and wellness for not just people of color, but people that are struggling on limited resources, and giving them courage to embrace their health and their children's health in a different way. Miss LaSharie Ty is also a up-and-coming musical artist. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kim. I appreciate the invitation and being amongst all these great people on this panel here. So I'm very interested to learn from everybody too as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And last, but we have 2 more. We're going to introduce David Foster. I'm not sure, David, can you hear us? I'm going to ask you to unmute your headset. Let me see, ask to unmute. Hello, can you hear us, David? Yes, we can. Yeah. Thank you. That's a nice office there you have. Thank you for being here. Mr. David Foster also goes by David Lyric. That's his formerly known as, that's his artist name. He is from St. Joseph, Missouri. He's been in the Atlanta area, ATL, for about 13 years, and he's all things multimedia with videography. He can be one of the few on the panel list today that said he shot the president with his camera, the former President Obama. He also has made music and videos for MTV and BET. He is at the pulse of the young people 40 and under that have a lot to say but don't know how to articulate it in a professional manner. But he is very prolific in how he fights. He's strategic in how he fights the good fight of faith. So David Foster, we thank you for being here. He is also an entrepreneur and is doing a lot of things with real estate as a business owner and providing affordable housing for many families in our community. Mr. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. I just made the 40 cutoff because I'm about to be 40 in 2 more weeks. But I don't tell a lot of people that. But I'm glad about that. I'm happy. I'm blessed. I'm excited to talk and also see what I can learn, and hopefully I can input something. I think this is a great start. But I'm also looking to see what we can do to actually take action because, you know, I want to kind of put our money where our mouth is, I guess, so to speak, and see where the rubber meets the road.
Good, good. Thank you for being here. We need to hear from the young people. You and Paul will represent them today. No pressure. We also have Nick Edwards, who is here. Nick Edwards is, to me, all things multimedia and tech, and he has worked for the Medical Association as as well as Missouri Western State University, and now KU. So,
we're not going to mention that.
Okay. I think people that are into technology and data and online classes are going to be critical, even more so than what you've done for our universities and medical entities before, because now everything's online and Zooming and live streaming. And if those measures don't work for our universities, those classes don't get out to the students. So he sets those up and makes sure every professor and every doctor can not only teach classes, but also perform surgery. So he is from St. Louis. He serves on the MidCity Excellence Board, and we thank him for his input. Did I get it all? A little bit of
Yeah, you got it all. I'm
right?
just blessed to be here. Hopefully we can get a good discussion going.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And then last but certainly not least, we have the pastor and founder of Faith Family Worship Center, located on 20th and Masseny and formerly St. Peter St. Paul Cathedral, Pastor Robert Warren. He is also my spouse and co-founder of MidCity Excellence that lets me stay up really late at night working on tasks that are passionate to my heart. And he is also has a master's in music education like Ken, and he is the only African-American male working at Carden Park right now. He loves working there and inspiring over 600 youth lives. That's one of our largest schools here in town. And so the school is located on Duncan Street. They call it Devil's Backbone, but I think we're about ready to snatch back whatever the devils try to steal from us and plant some positive seeds in those youth lives. Pastor R. Robert Warren, poet, author, pastor, teacher, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the first hot topic is, you know, everybody's been talking about George Floyd and his death that was publicized around the world. I think that's one of the most upsetting thing that has happened to us all year long, although we're just now getting, we can't get over it, but we're just trying to digest what has happened with Ahmaud Arbery. Avery. And so his mother actually lived in St. Joseph and attended, you know, one of our sister churches. And so it's difficult when those statistics and those names start becoming personal to us. And I think we're here tonight because nobody wants to wait for the next one or the next time, because it could easily be my nephews, it could be my husband. I told my husband on Monday night, I don't want to walk down here anymore because it's after 7:30 and I'm afraid for you. And he's like, you're afraid for me? I'm a big, strong. So, but I said I was afraid for him because there was no other people of color there. It was evident he was a big, strong Black man, and I didn't want them to be afraid of him or think he was trying to rob their home. I know I shouldn't have that fear. I try hard to be a woman of faith, but I am human, Reverend Hedge. So are we have things gotten better? Are they worse than they were during Rodney King, or are they just now more publicized? I don't know who wants to jump in first. Some people think after Obama being the president that you guys have everything you need. The playing field has been leveled. And so just work harder at this. And now we have all of this rioting again. So has it gotten worse, or is it just now being recorded?
Can I say, I think that it's more publicized now due to social media, and it's always been there. But now that we have social media, it's more publicized because everybody can whip out a phone and record it. So now it's always been there. Now we just see it a lot more.
Anybody else agree with her? It hasn't gotten better. It's the same. It's just more publicized.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I just believe that social media has just helped people become more aware. You know, like back when I was probably little, you know, people probably believed that it didn't happen often, and now it seems like it happens, you know, completely often. Not because, you know, everything is speeding back up, but just because, you know, people are starting to bring out their cameras more and, you know, are just starting to broadcast what's being happening.
Right.
No, I think it's kind of like the beginning of the civil rights movement in the 60s. It wasn't for a lot of people until they saw what was going on television, you know, for them to really see that these things are really going on. And I think through social media, we're kind of seeing some of those same things over again.
Anybody else agree? So what we're saying is the same, it's just publicized, or it is resurfacing and getting worse?
So
I'd like to speak to that.
Go ahead.
You know, there's a lot of overt racism in our nation. And I look at my time in the 80s in high school, and I lived in this bubble, and my friends were diverse, and we just kind of believed that the rest of the world was going to be like Hickman Mills in South Kansas City. And I grew up and left that place, and it wasn't that way. And so it's a coming of age thing, but I think that our society goes through cycles. I'd like to speak to people that I've read things where people say, well, you know, President Obama caused a lot of division. President Obama, in my opinion, caused zero division. President Obama was a man who came forth and, you know, just like Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon, President Obama was the first African-American man in our White House. I don't see how equality causes division. And I've read so many things where people have said, you know, me seeing someone else become equal does not make me lesser. And I think the issue in mind is that the people that are on the outside of the solution right now believe that by giving equality, they're going to lose something, and they're not. And there's a big gap in our understanding of what equality means. Equality doesn't mean I lose when my brethren come. And we have to get that into the discussion with people and help them understand that. No one's trying to take anybody else's rights away. We're just trying to spread it out so it covers us all.
Mm-hmm. So
I'd like to add something.
Go ahead.
So here's an interesting fact. In 1994, Congress instructed the Attorney General to keep track of police use of excessive force. So this was never carried out, and the FBI does not collect this data, which is why it was so hard for me to find any information on it. Now, I saw a couple statistics that said it got better, but even so, it's almost impossible to know. And that's the frustrating part about it, is you hear this a lot. Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Or is it just getting publicized? First and foremost, we need to hold these guys accountable to keeping records. If we can't do that, we don't know if it's getting worse or better.
Right.
If we can't do that, we're just talking amongst each other. So, and I love talking, but I hate talking without a purpose. At the end of the day, if we can hold some city officials accountable, if we can hold some police officers and some our police departments accountable, that's the only way it's going to change, in my opinion. I don't see it changing any other way. So
what's accountable being? Does that mean representation of people of color? Does that mean everybody that is on the force goes through so much sensitivity training? And I'm sure Chief Canale after you can respond after you. But what are you looking for when you talk about accountability?
So I posted this earlier, and I did some research, and everybody's posting things that we can do. These are 3 things that I see that we could probably do right away. Number 1, holding, I guess, our police officers. Now, in St. Joe, I've lived in Atlanta, I've lived in St. Joe, I've been to a lot of other cities. St. Joe actually is not that bad. I've been pulled over a couple times just for traffic tickets. The officers are actually pretty nice. One thing I will say, though, is that preventative measures, I think, are more important than anything. So it doesn't happen here. So the one thing that I'll say is that keeping track of police use of excessive force. So if we can do that in every city, now we can't do it in every city, but we can try to do it in our city. Also, whether or not our police department wears body cams, and I don't know if St. Joe does or not, but that's another thing. And then probably the third thing that I see is that, do we have de-escalation tactics? Are we practicing de-escalation tactics in terms of, do we just go from 0 to 10, or is there a process, you know, where the threat doesn't warrant, you know, excessive force? So
here's a bigger question with that. Is humanity across the board equal right now? So are our lives as Black people looked at in the same way as lives of white people? That's a question I'm throwing out to everyone, because it seems like to me that it's not always even.
So is the value of a white person the same? And are you asking just as society in a whole?
Yes.
Okay, that's a valid question.
But the bigger picture that we're talking about here.
I think it's valid when it's necessary or when it fits the mean of what the situation is. I would say everybody's, you used to have this term of you have the token, Black person that has to be there. They had to put in law that a certain quota of minority people had to be able to work at a certain workplace and things like that. So I think it's situational, like it fits the need when it's necessary.
Those are great comments. The comments that David had about police use of excessive force, is that tracked? What are are we training on how to de-escalate, etc.? I think those need to go to the St. Joe Police Chief, because, I think
I'd love to talk
it'd be good
about
for the
that.
public to know. Okay.
And the philosophy that we have in our department is building a culture about unconditional respect. I think that's really the key. And it comes from a variety of trainings. And absolutely, we do de-escalation training. Not only do we do it for our officers, we go out and do de-escalation training in the community. We do it with businesses. Anybody who asks us, we will come out there. We've done it with our nonprofits. And so that's an important skill. And it's not just important for the police, because a lot of times we respond to other people's biases or implicit biases, and we need to recognize that. And we don't, when we get there, we don't need somebody else firing the situation up. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to hit on. One is, we do a number of things. One of our trainings is on fair and impartial policing. And I'm one of the instructors because I think it should start at the top. And that's a 6-hour course that deals with implicit and explicit bias. I also do community training on that. It's about an hour to an hour and a half. And I go through some of the things that we teach our officers, as well as educating the group on implicit bias, because I find that a lot of times when I talk about implicit bias, a lot of folks really don't understand the implications. They don't understand the impact on lives. They don't understand the impact on the community and on us when we're trying to do our job. So I think that's one of the important things. Cultural proficiency training, we've been doing that for a number of years. We still do that. And we partnered with Missouri Western. We've partnered with Northwest Missouri. We've partnered with the NAACP, with InterServe, with the Immigration Alliance, partly to help fund it, but also in those classes, it's half the police and half the community. So we can talk about these things and talk about it and get each other's perspectives and talk about it. And so we can see people as people, because what we want is we want everyone to see people as people. So those are some of the, and then there's another thing that we do, outward mindset. So all this is about building a culture. And I see Paul here. We've done some, he was really helpful with some of his colleagues at Missouri Western, inviting us in to do some training on use of force and resistance. How the police department trains, how we look at it, we actually put some of the students in use of force situations so they could do some of the decision making, and also how we analyze it and what to do if you feel like you've been pulled over for no reason, that sort of thing, to try to, the more of that information we can get out there, I think that's a huge plus. The other things that fit into that picture are things like mental health first aid and crisis intervention team, because all these things apply to, listening non-judgmentally, empathy, things like stigma, negative attitudes, all these things play in together and building a bigger picture. So that's the approach that we take in the St. Joseph Police Department. And I think that's important.
If you're just now tuning in, we are live streaming right now on Facebook and Zoom. And so this is our Solution Summit. Typically we do it every Martin Luther King Day. We could not wait, until next year to do something. So our community center pulled together an esteemed panel of community leaders and people that have been working in the trenches in St. Joseph, Missouri for a while. And if you're just now joining us, the hot topic is racism, police brutality, and racial inequality. We said there are a lot of inequalities. We can address them all tonight. So we're talking about racial inequality in light of George Floyd who lost his life in a very horrific way, and it was publicized nationally. Our panelists, our guests are Paul Granberry, formerly the student governor at Missouri Western State University, now the owner of the Wealth Drip Investment Group. We have Chief Christopher Canale with the St. Joseph PD, talking about the training, the excessive use of force statistics and de-escalation development that they're doing with the community, with the force. We also have Lavelle Rucker, who is a social worker and a master educator, community organizer that is inspiring our youth to stay in school, finish their education. We have David Lyric, the music artist, but also David Foster, the person who is a real estate investor and also a professional author and rapper and videographer, everything multimedia. He stayed at the pulse and the heart of the youth in the community from the Atlanta area, transplanted back here to St. Joseph. We have Minister LaSherie Ties, who is a parents as teachers, breastfeeding advocate, everything health and wellness. She's also a musical artist. We have Lamina Davis, who is the owner of LD Data Solutions, everything techie and multimedia and websites. She is also a professional coder and a master in health information systems for a local facility. Ken Eberhardt is here. He is our longtime friend, 20 plus years from Missouri Western, a master state music educator from Troy, Wasena, St. Joseph School District. He has also worked in the inner city communities and rural inspired youth. He is livid about the state of America and is helping to change the culture. From the white male side, we appreciate his input, and this is who he is and has been for 25 plus years. We have Reverend Dr. Bill Hedge, who is my former teacher and administrator. Everybody give him a hand. Whew. He got us through. All us 7 Fosters went through the system with him in the educational system. Former assistant principal at Central High School. He is the current longtime pastor of St. Francis Missionary Baptist Church on 16th and Angelique. Also formerly a candidate for the 16th Congressional District as a state rep. We also have Robert Warren, Pastor Robert Warren, who is a longtime pastor of Faith Family Worship Center, a master educator of music at Carden Park with 630 something kids. And did I miss anybody? Okay, that's everybody. I'm Kimberly Warren, the CEO of MidCity Excellence on 604 South 20th. If you're just now tuning in, we're not just mad and fed up, sick and tired. We're actually going to do something about the state of people of color in our city and in America. Right now, we are talking about mad and fed up, sick and tired. Oh, okay, I had some feedback coming in there. We started off with Maya Angelou that says, we may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. If we give up, where are we gonna go? Community or chaos? And so the question is, could there have been anything that George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Trayvon Martin or any of these young men, could there have been anything they would have done differently? And what do you tell your children of color? And if you're Caucasian, what do you tell your kids? How do you train them so the outcomes are different? So is there anything that could have been done differently?
I would like to
know
speak,
the whole story.
I like to just speak to an area that it's the elephant in the room that people don't like to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. Okay, and let me just get to it quickly because I don't want to take all the time. One of the things that we're speaking of symptoms of racism, symptoms of how people interact with individuals. And what I mean by the symptoms of a police officer keeping his knee on the African-American male until he dies, symptoms of going in and shooting people, symptoms of of young people looting and tearing up their communities because they're reacting to. These are symptoms of a larger problem. And the larger problem is we don't have respect for one another. And Donald Trump is a symptom of that, not respecting one another as human beings. And here's what I mean by that. Can you imagine if we would have had Obama that had the same type of emphasis to say all people matter? Black people matter, the blue police officers that wear the uniforms matter, white people matter. If we would have had a president that would have followed up on the policies and just the human respect that we should have for one another after Barack Obama, some of these things may not have happened, because it would have then caused white, black, Hispanic, Asian, and whatever. Hey, we got to continue to respect one another. We got to continue to grow. But we have a president who, and he's not the only one, because definitely racism was before Trump got in the office. We understand that. But he has magnified the racism, and people who don't think people should be all treated the same and we all have the same effect said we have, and now in the White House, it's like we should keep our neck on the neck of people we don't like, that don't look like us, don't talk like us, don't think like us. This is what we should do. Can you imagine if we would have just had a president elected that, not that he had to be an Obama, I'm not saying that, but if he had at least the common decency to say, we got to keep this thing going in a positive manner, that all people matter. How can we make sure that everyone gets a piece of the economic pie? Because that's another issue that I don't have time to talk about, but how can everyone get a piece of the economic pie, that everybody has an opportunity to be educated, everybody has an opportunity to have health care, everyone has an opportunity to use their God-given talent to the best of their ability. We don't have that. We have a person that was opposite, that is truly a divider and a destroyer of those type of concepts. And so the bottom line for us is, how do we change that? There are people, Republicans and Democrats, that may believe like the present president does. But if we could get people in office that have a different concept of that all people should be treated equally, maybe we can change the police force. Maybe we can change the state house. Maybe we can change the House of Representatives and Senate at the local level, at the national level, at the county level. But as long as we have people who are symptoms of racism and division and trying to do anything we can to keep people down, we're going to continue to have these incidents that come along. Can you imagine, just like Chief Canale says, look at the things he's doing in his department. Well, now, if he was a person who had the mentality that the president had, we would have had some incidents in St. Joe. I guarantee you, we would have had some. But because at the top, when he says, I'm at the top, so I do the training. Well, think if we had somebody at the top of that, the top of our nation, that was a person who would inclusive, drawing people together, that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is not what he believes. So until we get those things changed, he's just a symptom of the whole problem that we've always faced. And people of color know that that's the cards that we're dealt. How do we deal with that, and how do we move forward to make sure that happens? So that's what I just wanted to say about that.
And so,
everybody's going to comment on that. Yeah. Everybody's going to comment.
I do got to leave shortly, so can I request that I comment?
Okay. Paul Granberry, former student governor and Wealth Drip owner and Wealth Drip investment owner, please comment on that. And then we're going to take it to Lavelle Rucker. And then, oh my goodness, Nick Edwards, I think, jumped in. Everybody, he said Donald Trump, and everybody was like, oh, no, this is my question. And so we were talking about, is there anything we could have done differently to prevent that long growing list of deaths by men, mostly men. We do have some women in there of color that have lost their lives in these, at the hands of law enforcement. So we're gonna go to Paul. Paul, what do you have to say? Is there something we could have done differently, or is it a political thing that was set up in the system and the symptoms, economic? What do you think?
And so, if what we are seeing, like he said, are just the symptoms of racism. And so if we want to knock it out, You know, if we want to knock out these systems, then we gotta come together like we're doing now and find a cure. And so it's not gonna happen overnight. It's not gonna happen next week. You know, and it's gonna happen over time. Hopefully within my lifetime. And the way we do this, you know, is by doing simple things. You know, by simply allowing, you know, the youth, telling the youth, you know, to embrace each other's differences, like literally embrace it. What do I mean? Is because, you know, we all have distinct qualities. We are all different, you know, and that's what makes us beautiful, because in the word beautiful is be you, you know, and so we should be happy that because we don't all have the same type of knowledge. We should be happy that we don't all know the same type of information. We don't have the same skin, because if we were all doing the same thing, you know, think about how life would really be. And so, like, we need to create a culture, you know, of embracing. And another thing that we need to do also as a youth, and I believe also we can implement in our education systems more, is, you know, to basically enhance civic engagement, you know, because we need young folks fired up going into the voter ballot. You know, we need young folks fired up, you know, waiting until they get 18 so they can register to vote. They're upset about the issues now, they're upset about the issues today. You know, let's create that culture of change. And so that way, and, you know, once they get 18, once they get 21, once they're eligible to vote, you know, that cycle continues. Now they're teaching, you know, now they're growing to teach their little ones, you know, that, hey, you know, voting is highly important. You know, if you have issues that you truly care about, you know, as a part of being an American citizen, you know, we have the right to vote. And that's something, you know, our ancestors fought for. And that's something that, you know, we need to fight. We need to continue this fight. And because, you know, Martin Luther King, his vision, you know, was for us to come together. You know, right now we are together, and it's our job to make sure that, you know, we're basically, you know, I'm basically eliminating racism, you know, for the next, so that way 2050, 2060 comes, you know, we won't have so many incidents. We won't have to do, you know, summits like these, because everybody has that great culture. But with that being said, that's all I have to say. I do have to go. I apologize. Thank you. And, you know, it was a pleasure being here.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. You, in 40 years, you will be what, 65? Hopefully we don't have to wait that long until you have gray hair or no hair for us to have a better world. But I agree. If we don't vote, and Reverend Hedge could probably tell you politically how many African Americans have been registered to vote, show up to vote, or engage. We have now the right to vote, and we're still not voting because we're, I think, disenfranchised and feel like the system still won't work for us. But some of these elections, there's only 20% of the people showing up. And so, Paul, thank you for being here. Reverend Hedge, why, I mean, we need more people like Paul saying young people have to vote.
And I'll see you guys. Thank you.
Right.
Thank
Bye.
you for having me.
Bye, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Kim, I know you said that I was up next, and so where I wanted to go.
I'm going to plug up my phone, but I'm still with everybody.
Okay, so what I wanted to speak to was to drill down on a micro level, and that is an individual level, where I think that everybody, each individual person has to be individually responsible for their own behavior. It is a choice of how we treat people, how we react to situations and circumstances that we are involved in. I looked at that video. It was just unbelievable as how other police officers just stood around and allowed the knee of the police officer to be up on the neck with that degree of pressure for that length of time and to do anything. So I looked at that and I wondered, why? What is going on in this officer's mind? What type of personality has he does he have that would make him do that for that length of time, and then for the other officers to just stand there?
Wow.
And to do nothing. And so I don't care about what other people in my neighborhood or what they are like. but I have to be responsible for me. I have to be accountable for how I look at things, how I respond to things, how the lenses of what I look through, and how I appreciate and respect my own self too. It's a reflection upon this officer. You see now that he is, I think he's fired. I do believe, if I'm right, I might not be, but the repercussions of that, you better believe he's thinking now about how he acted. So I think people need to be responsible for their own behaviors. And I thought about, my own sons, African-American sons, they best be doing the right thing and best be at the right place at the right time. If you are out there doing something that you should not be doing, you just increase your percentages of chances of something like this happening. If we're being stopped for speeding tickets, that's something that you shouldn't be doing. If this individual was doing something wrong, or anybody in the future is doing something that is inappropriate, then that can cause attention to ourselves. So I believe it's a personal responsibility. And I believe it's a personal responsibility for change. And that is also upon, my Caucasian friends as well, because we all have a responsibility of raising our own children and what we teach them to love each other or to respect each other. And also for my Caucasian friends to stand up for what is right, to stand up for humanity, equality, to teach their children to be on forums like this, or to be creating their own forums in the community or organizations that they are involved in. But it takes all of us. And it is something that I do believe that we all have to be responsible for individually. And then that brings about a collective respect for a community and for the whole.
So personal responsibility is something Lavelle brought up. I want to talk about what's the responsibility of the police departments. And Chief Canale, can you tell us about professional standards of your office and how you hold your men and women on the police department accountable, and what kind of policies you have if they're broken? Do we have to get up to that point where we see a horrific death? Are there some standards and policies and warning signs where you could say, because we hear this officer that, murdered George Floyd, he had some things going on, and I'm not sure, where this information is coming from, but I'm just hearing he had some misgivings in how he handled people in the past. So this is not a new experience for him. But what are you doing with your police department with professional standards, and are there any early warning signs that you can detect when there is someone that we need to get rid of them?
Yeah, I think it's very important that departments are proactive. And, my first reaction, as soon as I saw the picture, there's no excuse to ever have someone's knee pinned on someone's neck. We consider the neck or what we call a red area. And a red area means that if you do anything to that area, chances are it's going to cause serious bodily injury or death. And so, that just, immediately, makes me wonder, what are they training? What are they training on their use of force? With the St. Joseph Police Department, and this goes back even before I am, we require our folks to do a use of force report anytime they do anything beyond mere restraint. And that report gets reviewed by their sergeant, their captain, the commander. A separate copy goes to our professional standards office, and a separate copy goes to a quarterly review by one of our training officers to see if there's any training issues that we see in what's being applied. All that information is also collected in the same system, what we call an early warning system. Early warning system covers everything about somebody's career, whether it's complaints, whether it's issues with being late, anything that comes out, and it follows patterns. So if something comes out of the ordinary, we can intervene early. So, it might be that somebody's having issues at home with their marriage and it's coming out at work. We get to that early. We do something about it. Of course, more serious issues or something different. So the keys there is effective professional standards, but also what we have is a policy compliance officer. What policy compliance is we have a policy manual that's the size of a large phone book, and with over 100 policies. It's important that you do what you say you're doing. And the job with that office is couple fold. One is to keep up on the highest standards, especially because things change all the time. But the other thing is to gather proofs that we're doing what we say we're doing. And that's important because it would be easy for somebody to just start cutting a corner and somebody doesn't notice it. So those are the characteristics of a professional department, particularly early warning. And these are standards for accredited agencies that in my opinion, all agencies should have, and state certified agent. We're accredited through the state. But these are some of the most important things. And I also feel it's very important who those functions report to. And professional standards and policy and compliance, they report directly to me. Because, I think the gentleman that first thing he brought up, accountability. I think accountability absolutely is important. And like Lavelle said, taking personal responsibility for your actions. I think those are huge. And when it comes to trust and trust in the community, I look at it as and I'll try to be brief, but the things we do throughout the year, the things we've done with Missouri Western, the trainings that I do on implicit bias, and hopefully some of you can have a chance to attend one of those workshops where we go through things and we actually take with our officers and analyze situations where we have them slow it down and take a situation step by step, and at the decision-making points, have them go over decisions. And then the end, we tell them what happened. And those scenarios in the end, the reality was it was a tragic police intervention, so that we can show them how that can get out of control, how those things are important. So I think we're always putting into our bank account with the community. But anytime something like this happens in any department, any type of unprofessionalism, the videos that I've seen in different places, that pulls out of our local account too. That happened in Minneapolis. That takes away from our credibility in St. Joseph. That hurts each and every officer. When you've got one department that doesn't hold professional standards, that hurts us all. And then the other thing is it's a moving target. We've got to, change comes gentle pressure, particularly applied relentlessly. So to me, to bring about change, and the reason that we do some of the community training that we do is because it needs to be applied relentlessly. It needs to be applied by the police department. It needs to be applied by other agencies, because the police were never meant to be the primary agent of control in our society. The primary institutions of control, religion, your churches, your schools, your family, your parents, these are all those primary institutions of control. The criminal law was only meant to be a last-ditch effort when nothing else works. And unfortunately, I think sometimes we have folks that get upset about a certain thing, and their first thing they want to do is create a law and have law enforcement. That's not what policing was supposed to be based on. If you go back to the earliest principles, the police are the public are the police. It's a shared responsibility, and we got to get back to where we're all on the same page. So.
Chief
Sorry
Canale,
if I took up too much time.
No, do we have any body cameras or car cameras in our force? And where are we at with hiring minorities for the police force out of your force of over 100 people? Okay, we do have the in-car cameras, which also have audio. And when they're out of view of the camera, we encourage them to put on the audio if it can reach, because that actually helps us a lot, because believe it or not, some of the complaints we get change when they find out we do have video. We do not have body cameras. I would love to, just to start the program off. It's about $400,000. But right now we're in a situation where we aren't even replacing police vehicles, and we're putting 1.2 million miles a year on our police vehicles. So that's a particular challenge. I think money that's why training is so important. And I think good training will do more than a body cam does, because there again, what one gentleman said, and I think it was David, preventative. What prevents that? Creating that culture, that training. As far as minority recruitment, we're always looking to increase our minority recruitment.
every year we look at that, and what I do is I do an analysis of all sorts of things. I do an analysis on our victimology based on race, warrants based on race versus arrests based on race. I do an awful lot of comparisons to see if we're in line and see if those areas that are discretionary, if there's things that fall as outliners, because certain things like arrest on a warrant's not discretionary, but certain other things are. So I look at those other things that are discretionary to try to compare that. We have, when we look at that, I also, every year we do a demographic on the police department, the 2019 demographics. Let's see, our Black officers at 6.16% compared to the 2010 census, which was 5.86% Black. But I compare it more to the in 2018, we have a U.S. Census, they call it the Bureau's American Community Survey, which actually has our population as 81.5% white, 6.5% Black, 6.1% Hispanic, so about an 18.5% minority population. And actually look forward to the new census to actually see something, get something a little more recent. So when it comes to our Black officers, we're pretty close to that, but I think you need to really make a difference, to really be seen out there. I think you need to exceed that level when you're in a department like this. With our makeup, I spent the first 20 years of my career in a department where the minority was the majority. It was over 50% African American. So I think when we have a smaller minority, for people to realize as many as we have, and most of them work evenings and nights, it takes more for people to regularly see our minority officers.
Thank you so much, Chief. That's helpful to know what the department is doing behind the scene as far as prevention and intervention.
We are always looking for good officers, and we could use help, particularly when it comes to minorities. The minority officers that we've hired that have stayed have been here from St. Joe, mostly several from Midtown area. And so one of the concerns I have, you have things like this, it doesn't help me recruit minorities, that's for sure. And when it doesn't help me recruit anybody really, because when the table talk at home they've done, that doesn't attract that generation that we need to bring in good officers. So always look at, if you have somebody that's interested, please refer them to us. Bring them down. I'll give them a tour. We're starting to do things at the high school level and pre-high school level with the camps that we put on for children's camps. And we now, unfortunately, youth police academy that we do, those are all geared towards introducing them to police work, because there's a lot of good work out there, and you have these incidents that they're just so damaging to our profession. It just makes me sick.
Anybody else want to jump in there when we talk about, could this have been prevented? Do we think George Floyd, we don't know the whole story. There's many videos that are now surfacing. Do we know, how are you training your kids to prevent episode with law enforcement, with their principals, with their coaches? There's a lot of opportunity for conflict resolution, conversations surrounding this incident, and also how we're interacting with authority figures. Anybody want to jump in as a parent? Training men and women of color, your children, but also for white parents, what conversations are you having with your kids about being culturally sensitive and respecting other people?
Kimberly?
It's, we have to have that talk. This is what it means to be a male one and then a Black male at that. So I've always tried to teach and tell my children, if you do ever come into a situation like that, you always comply first. Don't try to give a rebuttal, comply, ask questions while you're doing it if you need to do that. But always comply, because I don't want to see my children become another hashtag. I don't want to see another incident like that with my friends' children or anybody else. So I think a lot of that too comes from what are we as the parents teaching our kids to do if that is a situation that arises. Be respectful, be courteous, make sure you're not, be where you're supposed to be, number one. If you're in the place where your mama told you not to go and you're there and something happens, you just have to be mindful in teaching them to make those good decisions, that when they are out in the world and doing those things by themselves, that they'll remember what has been drilled into them too.
Mm-hmm. And how old are your young men?
My men are 10 and 12.
Okay. That's a good age. You know, my niece is 7. She doesn't know what the N word is yet. And I asked my sister the other night, does she know what that is? When are we going to have to talk? And she's like, just hold up. Let her have a little innocence. And I was like, okay.
It's hard. I had one of my friends the other day ask me, just like her kids are younger, they're like 6 and 7. And she was like, when do I start talking to them about this? And I was like, I don't know. I've been pretty open, even just from growing up in Kansas City and then living in St. Joe. It is a big cultural difference growing up in a predominantly Black neighborhood and then being in St. Joe with a predominantly white neighborhood. And so my kids are growing up in a different environment that I grew up in. And so just teaching them, and we started having these talks probably when they started kindergarten, like just understanding that you're different and it's not a bad thing and we celebrate that, and just those little baby steps and going forward. So it just really kind of depends on, I think, the parents' level of comfort in having that conversation. And it's scary as a parent to have that conversation with your child, because you don't want your kids to go out being fearful of, you know, if they come across an officer, if there's an incident happening, like you don't want them to be scared. You also don't want to take away their innocence as a child to know that these are things that are happening in our world.
Okay. Thank you. Ken and then David. Ken, was you going to jump in there about your kids? I know you have a lot of conversations with your colleagues that may seem like kids at times, although they're grown-ups. Right. And you mentioned on Facebook how you had to redirect them with certain jokes and certain ways that they talked about people of color behind our backs.
You know, I want to follow on to role modeling. Reverend Hedge talked about that. Ms. Ruckers talked about it. The chief has talked about it. We talk about our national level leaders. That makes me pretty angry. It's not something I can really talk about. I'm going to vote in November. I'm going to do my part to change what I think needs to change. I want to talk about my upbringing really quickly and just talk about how I believe racism starts in the home, and I believe it stops in the home. And we're talking about symptoms. And if you want to deal with the symptoms, we're going to be stuck dealing with the symptoms for a long time. If you want to get to the root cause, you know, my dad's still alive. He's 83 years old. I think we can send a bunch of guys to live with him for a week and he can set them straight. I'll tell you what my father did for me as a young man. I have a picture on my mantle in my apartment that I'm going to be going into from my car here, when we're done talking. My father was a goofy kid from St. Joe. He had Vaseline in his hair like Elvis Presley. He wore a leather jacket. He showed up at Fort Benning, Georgia in boot camp in 1960. Nobody wanted to partner with him. There was another guy on my dad's student named Robert Henderson. He was an African-American young man. We're talking spring of 1960 in the deep South in Georgia. And I been standing arm in arm. And I had about that picture when I was a boy and saying, Dad, how did this happen? And he said, we needed each other. We needed each other because my dad was not from the South. Robert was not from the South. You're talking about an integrated military. So where my values come from? It comes from my home, what I take in my classroom as a teacher, equity, everything that I share with my students, as a role model.
Darn it. Ken, you're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me, Ken, but if you dial in on that number, you can use your phone as your audio and the stream will be stronger. If you want to dial in, you can still see me, but go on and do you have the capacity to dial in?
Let me, I think I can.
I don't want to lose you.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit better. The stream's a little better.
I'm talking about, just my father role modeling, being a gentleman and embracing everyone. And, that role modeling starts at home, and you have to have willing to say to children, regardless of what your yeah, we have to behave a certain way around police, but
Darn it. Ken, you're breaking up.
Oh.
You got to get a stronger stream or maybe phone in. If you can phone in, then we can use that audio. Let me see if he can fix that. Let's go to David real quick. Was it David that was next that was going to talk a little bit about either role modeling or could the situation have been prevented? What kind of conversations are we having with the people? Something good in the hood, people in the streets? What are the young people saying?
Yeah, so consider me young, I guess. But my question is this, and preventative measures, they have to be talked about more than everything else. Because if we're not talking about how to prevent it next time, we're just sitting ducks. We're just sitting around waiting for another incident to happen. I'm tired of that. I've been called all sorts of racial slurs. I've had to fight for just my skin color before. So I'm going to speak very boldly about that. I am comfortable with it. It does make me feel a whole lot better about Chief Canale because his answers are actually really good. My only question to him is that you don't have to answer it now, but would we be opposed to having our police officers wear body cameras? But that's a question for maybe a little bit later. I do like Ken's comment of it starts in the home. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Hedge, who's a community leader. But then I also think about Ms. Lavelle Rucker, who talks about accountability. And that accountability starts with you, but then it starts with your family. And then it starts with your kids. And then it starts with your neighborhood. And then you slowly grow. And I still am sold out on the fact that the people who I can affect the most are always the ones that I can touch, I can talk to, I can communicate with. So with that being said, I think it's highly important to have community leaders. And even the fact that Chief Canale is able to get on this, this video Zoom panel means a lot because when it starts from a kid who's the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and he's looking up to his heroes, and he sees, his heroes, whether he's white or black, the community leaders are his heroes. You're gonna find heroes that don't necessarily look like you, but if they reach out to you and they develop a relationship with you and a connection with you, they can also be your heroes. I got heroes that are black, but I got heroes that are other colors because I can't be so narrow-minded as to think I can't learn anything from anywhere else. So that's one of my things that I would say is that, voting I think is important. I believe what's even more important than voting is what do you do with the people that you can touch, the people that are right next to you, the people who live in your neighborhood, your community leaders, your community police chief, your community pastors, your community activists, or just the grocery store lady. These things are extremely important to me. And I think it gets lost in translation when we start trying to change a national problem before we change a local problem. 1, 2, 3 makes a lot more sense to me than 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, or 8 million, 10 million, 12 million. In my opinion, it has to start with the people you can touch. So that's probably my last comment. My only question is, would we be opposed to having body camera? Maybe we don't need it as much as in St. Joe as other cities do, but I'm just thinking about preventative measures because what's going to happen is 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 years. I don't know how long it's going to take, but eventually this incident is going to happen again. Hopefully it doesn't happen here, but it's going to happen somewhere. So with that being said, if we can do our best to cut it off before it gets to that point, I would hate to see rioting here. Now, here's the thing about rioting, and this is just a side note. I don't agree writing does a whole lot, but I understand it. I don't think it really has a huge, I don't think it has a huge benefit, but I understand it. I get so mad that I want to write. And then but I had a good dad. I listened to him. I think about one of the things that he said. He was a prison chaplain. And when I would say something crazy, he would say, yeah, there's a lot of guys in prison that talk like that. So I have that type of rationale. There's a lot of people that don't. So with that being said, I don't agree that it solves much, but I understand why they're mad enough to do that.
Moderator Warren.
And that's probably my.
Moderator Warren, I just want to say something quickly. I want to piggyback on LaSherie's comments. And then I'd like to speak, Lamina, I'd like for you, I need to get your number because I have some questions about technical things. So just reach out to me. I got a question. I was going to say, LaSherie make a very point. You say teaching your boy, your young men, and what we need to do. Kim's question was, we do so this incident doesn't happen. Well, one of the things I'm thinking about, we should learn how, when we talk about addressing authority and our police, one of the things that we were taught when we were growing up, if you had an issue with an adult, get all the information you can get, then you come home to the parent and let the parent go down and talk about what needs to be talked about, because chances are the child doesn't have the vocabulary or the insight to be able to do that. Not all children, but the majority of them, they don't. So what we should be teaching them, when a police officer address you, give him the respect that whether he deserves it or not, because he's in that blue, but what you should be doing, here's what you should be telling your child. Look at his name, make sure you look at him in his face, get his name, get his badge number, get his car number, get those things that when you go back home to parents and say, Mom and Dad, I really had an issue. This officer stopped me and I didn't do anything. Here's his badge number, here's his name, here's his car. This is what was going on. But here's one of the issues we have to face as parents of color and just parents, period. We have parents that don't teach our children those things, because some of our parents lack parenting skills, period. The reason why we have survived and lived and grown and those type of things, because we had parents that sat down with you and said, now boy, this is where you handle situations that you're going to be faced with. Parents talking to Black kids about how you address the police officer is nothing new. It's new. I mean, it may seem new to people, but that's nothing new. I've had that conversation with my dad many, many years ago. But he told me, this is what you need to do. If you come to me as I'm your parent. Let me go down and I'll take care of the situation. And that's what we got to learn how to teach our young men, especially and our young ladies, that if you have an issue with authority, get the information you need, give them the respect of their office, not necessarily of them, but of their office. You come back to me as a parent. Well, how many of those children can go back to their parents, and then their parents will say, okay, we're going to take care of this. We're going downtown, or we're going to the school board, or we're going to the schoolhouse, and we're going to address what your side of the issue, and let me get all the facts. Some of our parents, again, that's an issue we have to work on with training our parents to know how to train our children so these type of incidents don't happen. Because again, we can't control who's in the blue uniform always, but we can control how we respond to that and what actions we can take to make sure that we don't have the type of situation that happened to the young man, to Brother Floyd in Minneapolis.
I agree with you, Dr. Hedge. Chief Canale said, we have a job to do, but it's also the churches, it's also the schools, the family, and criminal law is at the bottom. They're not supposed to be raising our kids. And again, if we're raising our kids in a counterproductive manner, that's a nice way, I guess, politically correct way of saying it. I had 2 kids that was taken home from our center a couple months ago. They started fighting in the backseat of my car, and I pulled over the car and said, what is going on? They were cousins. One had hit the other one. I'm talking about like first graders and a fourth grader, and the other one punched her in the gut. That my daddy said, don't take none of that. If anybody ever says anything to me or disrespects me, you better beat them down. And I was like, I believe your daddy told you that. So I'm going to talk to your daddy because I cannot drive this car with y'all doing WWE in my back seat. And so we have had parents that told them, if that teacher disrespects you, well, what's disrespect? If they say anything to you in a certain tone, you don't take nothing off of that teacher. And so because people that are my age and a little bit younger, they have been taught a certain way to train their kids. I think the pastors and Pastor Warren, I'm going to ask you to step in and maybe can step in and say, this is a more effective way to interact. I had a wonderful guy the other day, Tony Drummond, and I told him I was going to quote him. He said, we were taught to say, sir. You say sir to that officer. And then one of my relatives said, I said, what are you telling your black sons? How to interact with law enforcement? And she said, I told them, you do whatever that officer tells you, and we'll talk about how he said it. If he did it with more force, you come out alive in that encounter. Do not argue with him. Don't tell him, I ain't taking that. You can't talk to me that way. There are situations on this of dead people of color that they felt like they did everything right and they still wound up dead. That's some other thing. Some other things we have to talk about, those injustices. But I'm wondering if there was 5% of error on some of these people's part where they could have said sir or yes sir or whatever to come out alive, and we'll, sue somebody later, but so I don't know. Pastor Warren, what do you think the churches are doing that we don't see? I know you have a lot of behind the scenes mentorships with young men and young boys and your stomp and drums and all that. What's the church's role in all of this?
I don't know about the church's role, because though, of course, most people when we grew up went to church. So
you got to start there. Let's backtrack.
So the church is still there. We're still doing what we're doing to teach faith for those who are in church, and that they'll probably get it. And their parents, the kids' parents are raising them as they should in church. But most people don't attend church anymore. So that's and as Dr. Head said, and I heard somebody else say it. And as being an educator, being in elementary education, seeing front line, this generation is coming up. I mean, disrespect is their number one thing. They don't, to respect, there's no respect. There are a few, but for the most, they kind of almost pride themselves in being disrespectful. And I think it's their fault. Because they just have to have the right guy. If the right guy, they will do it. I've seen that. The kids that I teach and educate, you guide them the right way, have a great relationship with them, they will follow you. But the parents of those children, you kind of, when you meet them, you say, I see why you're doing what you're doing. Because, and just, that's now, this is 2020, and just 20 years ago when I taught the high school, been in high school, when you had there were parents coming in there and you had to separate the parent from beating the other kid down, so that was 20 years ago. And now that parent is now raising, their children are now in school. So it's heightened. It's another generation. So we have a lot to do. And these police officers encounter this generation constantly. So they're at a height already. They're already at a height because this generation is disrespectful. So they're already on edge. And so I'm learning as the best way that they teach us as educators, you de-escalate, because they're going to come at you no matter what. And so we have learned our best discipline is that, there's some time you got to rile up and let them know, hey, this is my classroom, but the main thing is that you're just being unemotional and just managing that class and managing those people. And so, you know, that is a different culture and a different generation. The church is doing what it's doing. It's raising up. We have some male mentor programs. Every church has something for their children and for young people that they do for young people. But that's the church. We are now in this area. We're just, I mean, 75 to 78% in Buchanan County don't go to church. So, you know, there's a deficit.
Wow.
Kimberly?
Nick, did you have something before I go back to Chief?
Yeah, I kind of feel like our central theme that we're talking about is really accountability. And, you know, I agree with some of the things that you guys have said, that accountability, it really starts in the home. And it used to start in the home. I feel like that's changed. But I also want to add that it also is leadership. And I think it speaks volumes right now, the fact that those who are in leadership are saying nothing. And I think it also says something that we're not even expecting those in leadership, talking about the president, to actually even say anything at this point, because we already know what he's going to say. I just think that accountability, you know, starting from the home and also in leadership, you know, is something that I think we need to think about.
Very good.
Wow, that's very good. Chief Canale.
I wanted to start by answering David's question that he had earlier. Yes, we have actually, when it comes to body cameras, yeah, we would embrace body cameras. We've actually, years ago, we did a number of test drives, so to speak, with body cameras with several different solutions to see what would work best with us. At that time, the prosecutor didn't support them, but we also didn't have the funding. I don't think we have that issue anymore with our current prosecutor, but we do have an issue with the funding. And when you talk about leaders being here, I'm also your interim city manager right now. So I really know about the money right now. And
wow,
we've got some challenging times. But, you know, I hope at some point we do have body cameras. But as I mentioned earlier, you have things like cars and stuff that we need first. The other thing I wanted to comment on just very briefly is one of the, you know, and I've been called everything but sir, everything but Chris at different times in my career. But, you know, what we try to train our officers, and I think it's important for everybody, is to understand your triggers. What are your triggers? And if you don't know what your trigger is, it's hard to control. So, you know, I found out the hard way over 15 years ago. One of my triggers is when someone spits in my face. And so I had to learn when that happens, that I have to consciously control how I react to something like that. So triggers are important. And the one thing that a pet peeve of most officers is when, you know, we want to start relationships with kids when they're young. That's why for several years now we've had the Cops Who Care Kids Camp, and we always bring in a good mixture of at-risk youth and not at-risk youth to interact together. And that's why we do some mentoring in the schools. I do a lot of reading in the schools starting at second grade. Those things to me are very important. But when somebody tells their kids, especially young kids, don't do that or I'm going to get this policeman on you. To us, that's the worst message that you could send, because we want that positive relationship. We want, especially young kids, if they're lost, Lord knows the last thing we want them to do is hide from us when we're trying to help their parents find them because they're already afraid of the police. So, you know, that relationship, that ability to communicate back and forth. And when we have those, even some of the kids that may be difficult in school settings and things like that, they have a rapport with our officers early on. They will always, you know, my experience has been, I've developed relationships with young kids that got in a lot of trouble later on. But when I got there, they were always respectful of me because of the relationship that I built. And you can't say nothing enough about relationship building.
Chief,
and hopefully I answered David's question too on the body cams.
Chief Conley, I really appreciate you saying or bringing up the fact that primary institution of control is the parents. We say this in education all the time when we have inappropriate behavior being exemplified in the classroom hallway on our campus grounds. And that is that you know, these students feel like they have, or individuals feel like they have a sense of entitlement to behave or act or the way they want to, and nobody can say anything different. And someone spoke to the, I think it was Reverend Hedge, spoke to the fact of the parents sometimes are the ones that, or maybe it was Pastor Warren, but spoke to the fact that parents are the ones that encourage or support that type or model that type of behavior themselves. And so we have said it in education, and we know this, and that is our parents are our first teachers. And we take them to church, so that's where spirituality or, you know, will play its part, and the church can wrap around and raise and instill the values and the morals. But also Chief Canale mentioned mental health. And so mental health also includes anger issues, or the inability to control self. So we're at self-regulation. People have to know how to self-regulate. And until moms and dads begin to raise and teach their children at home and validate their kids so they grow up with a sense of self-respect. Everybody on this forum tonight, I imagine that none of us would have been caught in any kind of situation that we would probably be in that would cause a inappropriate action by a law enforcement person. And you got to ask yourself, well, why wouldn't that happen? And it's because of how each one of us were raised. David mentioned earlier about how his father, you know, raised him. Each one of us here on this forum, if we were to model and to raise up, you know, be responsible for others, they would have a sense of values and morals implemented into them. And, you know, I think it's a pretty simple thing. I mean, I know it's on a huge macro level, but until we start planting those seeds right in our own home, education is not going to change. Behaviors are not going to change. And it's those type of things that we can talk until the cows come home. But those people who are listening to your broadcast live, they've got to make a decision that I'm going to be a part of that change. The whites, the blacks, the Hispanics, the Indonesians, every single one has got to take personal responsibility on, I don't like what I see, and it starts with me.
Can I just jump in here? I'm going to
Yes.
piggyback off of that.
And then Ken just joined us back. And then we're going to each give one closing comment, because I said it's going to be about an hour and a half. And I know because of techie situations, I'm glad Facebook and Zoom are getting along again tonight. But we're going to go to Lamina and then Ken Eberhardt, and then each person will give a closing remark.
Hey, Kim, I have to
Lamina.
jump on.
Okay.
Hey, have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
All
Nick,
right.
give us a
Take
closing
care.
remark. What are you going to do to commit to make sure that we're a part of the change?
Closing remarks. I'm going to continue to try to work within my community to be a part of that change. I'm going to continue to work within my family to teach the difference between right and wrong to my children, and to teach them how to respect officers, elders, and I'm going to take it from there. And yeah, so those are the main things that I plan to do.
And continue serving on the MidCity Excellence Board. Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right.
Lamina, and then Ken Eberhardt in your closing remarks. Lamina.
Okay, what I wanted to jump on here and say is that we seem to do this a lot. We seem to have great discussion, you know, talk about things we should be doing, and then things die down and we forget and we go back and we set in our own ways until it happens again. So what can we do now to get the ball rolling, to get things going so that we are not going back into sitting by and waiting for it to happen again. And again, I also want to know, we have kids out here who are already set in their ways. They already, their minds are already made up. What can we do to bring that trust back between the youth now and the police officers? Because some kids out here don't have that parental guidance at home. They have nothing at home. So what can we do to get these kids to trust authority figures again? And like my first question, what can we do to get the ball rolling now, not just talk a good game and then go back to life as normal?
Yeah, Lamina, can you say what you can do? Because I know you have brought a lot of teams together after the SUV accident. And if you all haven't heard Lamina speak and her passionate message of how she's recovering from the loss of her son in that accident, and how she has one son and one daughter that she is yet pouring into, and has, you know, so what one thing do you think you can commit to in your expertise and in your, with your vantage point with all of these young people that were friends of your son's?
Just listen and be there for them and try and guide them, because I have several young men who inbox me regularly, just not doing okay. And so I sit and I talk with them, and by the end of our little talk, they're feeling a little better and they're not going to go do something stupid. So we need mentors to talk to these kids. Don't just judge a book by its cover. Get to know these kids and you know, form a rapport with them so that they feel like somebody cares. Because as soon as you say, oh, well, I give up on you, I already know what you're about, then they're just going to go do what they're going to do, and then it's too late. You know, they already don't trust police because of what they see or what they've heard. They don't have the right guidance. They need some guidance. They need someone on their side. And we also need to get out there and take the first steps and not just fall back into, oh, well, this happened, I'm angry, we rioted, okay, let's go back to work and let's be normal. We really need to do something now.
Don't give up on them. Thank you, Lamina. She goes back to what Lavelle said about that mental health piece. They have some emotional issues that need to be addressed. Ken, in your closing statements, you wanted to talk about a little bit about addressing the root causes and parents raising the expectations, because you said your parents expected you to step up and embrace diversity. So Ken, in closing, can you make some remarks of what you're committed to doing?
Well, first of all, as a role model, I'm in a classroom. I teach in a charter school. We're in downtown Kansas City. My kids are looking for answers all the time. They are affected by this, guys, like you wouldn't believe. And I looked around the middle school lunchroom a year ago, and I just took roll in my head, and I said, okay, you know, there's 20 kids sitting in my section. I'm watching them eat lunch. You know, there's 8 African-American kids. There's 7 Caucasian kids. There's, you know, 6 Hispanic kids. Look at our diversity. Look how great that is. My kids are safe when they're at our school because our school is about diversity. The world outside of their school is not as safe. And so we're building relationships with kids all the time. I have to be that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant man in their life that says, look, I'm for you. I support you. I'm with you. We're not in school now. We've done remote learning. We've stayed connected with the kids with Zoom and email, and just build those relationships. Continue to foster and support and earn their trust. Kids are living in a traumatized world. You know, these videos, when I'm sure they're watching them, they're aware of what's going on. Their parents have had the talk with their African-American students. This is how you have to behave when you encounter law enforcement. You know, you're going to be held to a different standard. Just continue to build and build trust and get them through a place where, you know, I was never harassed by cops. You know, I didn't have to deal with this as a young man. You know, my parents said, you know, if you get stopped, you know, be polite, show them your driver's license, say yes sir, no sir, get your ticket, you know, pay it. There was no getting out of a ticket when I was a kid. You had to pay for it. You know, I'm a role model. My dad was a role model. And without talking a long, long time, you know, when you guys couldn't hear me, I was just talking about how there's a picture on my mantle of my dad arm in arm with a guy named Robert Henderson, who was the only African-American soldier in his basic training platoon in Fort Benning, Georgia, spring of 1960. And my dad needed Robert because Robert was a guy that nobody wanted around. None of the guys in my dad's basic training platoon wanted him around because he was this goofy kid who thought he was all came down from St. Joe to be in the Army at age 23. So I want to preserve my father's heritage, his legacy. I have a black and white picture of my dad showing me before I was born. He expected me to embrace people, them, be their brother, support them. And, you know, that's I hope I am. I've known Kimberly and Robert since college. You're not just people I know, you're my friends. And I fear for my friends. I fear for my friends who I love. And I want my children, who are late teens, early 20s, to inherit a world where we're past this. We've stopped dealing with symptoms. We've got to get to the root cause. It begins in the home. We have to continue to support and promote the education of equity from in the home, the father, respect leaders, and just and continue to believe that we're going to turn a corner and we're going to turn a page. You know.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate you being candid and passionate. And it's just not about this situation here. You have spoken out, and we've addressed some situations before, and I appreciate you being courageous. Hopefully, we'll bring this panel back. I'm hoping we're coming back in a couple weeks or a month and saying, you know what, we got the convictions. We still have a person that is dead, but we have a conviction here. We're on a roll. And a lot of people spoke out, and we have contacted youth in our community, or I've met with a group of parents in my community to do ABCD. So in closing, LaCherie, commit to one thing. You're already doing awesome things, but commit to one thing in light of this horrific murder situation right here. Commit to one thing that you think you may do in a different way or just a more consistent manner.
My commitment is to my children, to their friends that they hang out with and come around with, and being honest with them and just keep encouraging them and supporting them and being that listening ear if they need that, showing them that support, but also helping them to be aware of their surroundings, being respectful, and doing those things that they should be doing right, and stay on a good path.
Thank you so much. You already have a great rapport with the parents with the breastfeeding. I know you can get to a lot of moms and dads that way. You know, that's the third person that said something about relationships and rapport building and community and being consistent. Lamina said it, Ken said it, Lala said it. I'm interested in what David is going to say, that his commitment's going to be to change the culture and the climate, the hostility that we're in right now. David, you may not just be able to commit to one thing.
No, I think it's important that you commit to one thing, because, you know, that's kind of my mindset right now at this point in my life, is the fact that if I'm able to kind of quantify what's going on around me in my neighborhood, or the people close to me, or the people that I can touch, then I could say that I've done better this week than I did last week. So with that being said, you know, first of all, I want to say I learned a lot from all of this, and I had a lot of questions, and I would say probably most of them were answered. But I would like to continue to be proactive and not reactive. So I think an ongoing relationship with people in your community leaders, and I don't like looking at community leaders like they are presidents and people who we can't get on the phone and talk to. People who are leaders are you, are me, or Lasha Reed, who is the mother of her 2 boys. Definitely, you know, Pastor Hedge, Kimberly Warren, Robert Warren, Chief Canale, even just the grocery store guy. Like, if you're a teacher, whatever you are, there's somebody that you can lead. You're a leader of somebody. And I think it's extremely important that we realize that. Like, me personally, what I would like to do is I'd like to connect probably with Lamina. You know, I know there's Big Brothers, Big Sisters. There's different organizations that we can connect to people. But with that being said, I mean, there's also, you could probably just get on the phone and you know, find somebody that could use a mentor. Find somebody that could say, hey, let's go shoot some hoops. Find somebody that you could say, you got anything you'd like to talk about right now, you know? So if you are a contributing person to our society in any way, you have something to give back. And I think it's a must that you try to do that. But with that being said, you know, I think it's important that we have, of course, black and white. Ken, who is a white brother who's rebuilding relationships, which is extremely important that we see people from different cultures. Hopefully we can be a good example and continue to mentor people. Some of you guys are already mentoring people. Me personally, I could probably do a better job of actually reaching out to probably, I don't know, teenage who just hoops with, talk to them about maybe some of the things that I've been through. And with that being said, hopefully shed some insight on their life.
Thank you, David. We'll be there for your 40th. I'm not sure what the birthday party is going to look like, but we need another video. I forgot to say, David produced that My Neighborhood video. I'll put it up on the MidCity site again. Right after the SUV accident, we just needed some music to heal. And Ken mentioned that music speaks volumes, and it brings young people, it brings Black, whites, Latinos, people of all different backgrounds together. So we need something to heal the soul right now, because Minneapolis is burning, but there's a lot of people that are burning on the inside. Lavelle, I'm going to ask you to, Miss Lavelle Rucker, give some closing remarks. You talked about the pain, the hurt, the emotional, mental health component, and Gandhi said an eye for an eye makes the world blind. So you're already in motion, but what one thing do you think we need to be committed to, or you can commit to help ensure a higher quality of life for the residents of our community?
First of all, I got to say thanks for not asking me first, because you gave me time to think about it. So, secondly, I will continue to do what I am doing. I believe that it is something that growing up in my home, that it was instilled in me to be somebody who goes and self-helps, helps others, helps build others. In my spiritual life, I'm growing myself, and I'm learning to, number one, know who I am. And I think individuals don't know who they are. To be self-sufficient in your own skin. History has made many people of color, or those that are of a minority, feel less than. So I think people need to know who they are and need to feel comfortable in who they are. That will help them go a long way. And then thirdly, I will keep doing, and that is helping students. I believe that that's my calling. I was made to do that. And I always go towards those who seem not to be a part of the popular crowd, or who maybe are over there standing alone. I will always and continue to go and befriend those, and to help encourage them to reach their full potential, to understand that they are important, and to help them just have and realize and value their own strengths, and know that they've got something to contribute. And then lastly, do something really different. I believe that I am going to have the courage enough to stand and ask the question of my Caucasian friends, who I have not had this conversation with before, what do you think that your part is in bringing about peace in a situation that you may not look at, that you are a part of the solution to? Because I think sometimes if it's not touching us directly, or it's not touching us and we've got some distance from the issue or the problem, then we stand back from it. And so I think that I will just have to have the courage now to ask my friends, what do you think is your part in bringing about a solution to this?
Wow, that is profound. Eleanor Roosevelt said, it isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe in it. It isn't enough to just believe in it. One must work at it. And so we're asking your friends to roll up their sleeves. That's very profound. Wow, thank you so much for your time too being here. We're wrapping it down, but we got some long-winded preachers. I'm going to have to get them in there in closing. Reverend Hedge, Pastor Warren, we're almost there, but you know, Carol Pittman, one of our Mid-City retired teachers, said 18 previous complaints on this officer, and he still was an officer. So she thinks this could have been prevented. Someone else says George Floyd was brutally murdered. And I'm taking some comments from the online Facebook audience. Thanks for being there. He was murdered in broad daylight by police officers. They have been paid leave. Now we need them arrested and jailed with the other murderers of this world. We still don't have justice. What are your sermons going to look like? What are your behind the scenes commitments going to look like? You've had a lifetime of investing in people. Where do we go from here?
Just quickly, I'm just going to use, as we all have, we have a sphere of influence around certain people, and whatever that is, we have to have the holy boldness and the courage to stand up and make sure that what we believe and how we live is imparted to individuals that it's over, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Wow. You don't have to be me and I don't have to be you. I like that. Use your sphere of influence, your holy boldness and sphere of influence. Thank you so much. Lavelle also touched on prayer and spirituality too. Thank you. Reverend, Pastor, Teacher, Robert Warren, give us your closing remarks on how you're going to be a part of this change.
Well, mine is, of course, as I'm still in education right now and dealing with my 600 plus kids and being an influence in their life. And as I teach them, they're teaching me how to deal with their generation, which is primarily about relationships. This generation, if you get in there and if you have a relationship with them and build that rapport, you got them. You got them for life, and they won't leave you no matter what. I have kids show up after school, before school, for our percussion, for our choir, and you know, it's that relationship for this generation. They love it, and because they don't get that at home for some reason. There's something missing at home, that caring, you know, and compassion, and instead of being screamed at. And then, of course, you know, church-wise, I'm going to preach the gospel. I believe the gospel is the hope of the world. You know, it is, I mean, politics is great, but it changes civil, but it's not going to change hearts. The gospel is the hope of the world. You know, it's you give them Jesus, and you have to, that, I think that just changes, you have to change their heart from the inside out. As I talked to you this morning, your grandfather can go into an old white town, and the sheriff, this is 1970s, tell him he don't want the blacks here, and he said, I didn't come here for the blacks. And he was a black man, and his first member of that church was the sheriff. That's because he shared the gospel and baptized that man. You know, I said, that's what I'm gonna flow from, because that's what can change heart. Is the gospel, is the hope of the world. That's what I believe.
Thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate your time and your input. And we're going to end it. You know, this started as a justice, civil rights, human rights issue. There's many ways to get there. But in reality, cities are still burning and we still have justice that has not taken place. So I want to thank Chief Canale for being here, and I want to give him the final closing remarks. You're already committed. Our ideologies have separated people, but dreams and anguish and pain have brought us together. And so what will you continue to do to be a part of change?
Well, to start, our success depends on community and on community support. And so, you know, we've had some, you know, the pandemic's been a setback, because for us to keep community support and gain more community support is we have to have constant interaction. And obviously these challenges do that. And then we have 2 significant incidents across the country that has seriously hurt every police officer in every department in this country with these incidents that take away. So, you know, my commitment is to continue to push that outward mindset, reach out to the community, and continue to build those relationships, because I think that's so important. But I also think there's a personal component, and you know, I think Lavelle brought that up, is on a personal level, getting out there, and maybe part of it might be setting an example, and letting people know not to be afraid to have these conversations, not to be afraid to open up and discuss things, because that's how we gain understanding. That's how we learn from each other, and that's how relationships are built.
Fantastic. I just want to thank everybody for watching and listening and for weighing in today. We are clearly stronger together. We can go alone fast, but we can go farther together. So I'll end with a quote by Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. The ultimate measure of a person is not where one stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where one stands in the time of challenge and controversy. Clearly, we have a ways to go, but I think the fact tonight that we just stepped aside from our daily jobs and family commitments and say we're going to bring this conversation together to talk about racism, brutality, inequality, and find some solutions to give people hope. I think that was very important that we did that, and critical and timely. So thank you all.
Kim, would you be, Kim?
I was trying to jump in there. Okay.
Lamina, my contact information. Would you give Lamina my contact information?
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
I will share this as a group, and hopefully we'll come back together, you know, in a month, middle of the summer, who knows when. We should bring an attorney in here too to add some legal things. I think that may shed light. But for those that are watching on Facebook, thank you for your time. Please inbox us or just send us some comments if you enjoyed the show. We'll continue the MCE show, and hopefully we'll see you back on our campus at 604 South 20th Street soon. God bless you all. I'm Kimberly Warren. Have a great night.